My name's Tom Harper, and my roots run deeper into this land than the cedar posts that hold my fences. 60 acres of stubborn soil, biting wind, and the kind of silence you only get when you're far enough from the nearest Starbucks. This place, tucked into the foothills of Colorado, isn't just a farm. It's a bloodline. My grandfather carved it out with his own hands back in the 20s. My father held it through blizzards, droughts, and 3 economic recessions. And now, it's mine. It's not glamorous. There are no Instagram-worthy sunflowers or pick-your-own-berries events here. Just honest cattle, rusted tools with history, and the real king of the property, Bruno. Now, Bruno ain't just any bull. He's the great-grandson of Bartholomew, a prize-winning Hereford my grandfather imported from Texas back when livestock was status. Bartholomew was once on the cover of Agri-World magazine in 1963, a sepia-toned beast with a regal stance and eyes like he knew he owned the world. My old man framed that cover and hung it in the barn like a family portrait. Bruno? He's bigger, meaner, and somehow carries that same presence, the kind of animal that makes you think twice about crossing a fence uninvited. Speaking of which, uninvited has become a recurring theme since the HOA moved in next door. Deer Hollow Preserve. Even the name reeks of pretension. I don't know what it is about people who live in cul-de-sacs and think buying a 2,000-square-foot home with matching mailboxes makes them lords of the land. Their queen, of course, is Karen Glass, HOA president, self-appointed enforcer of aesthetics, and apparently allergic to manure, which is unfortunate given our geographical proximity. It started with letters, polite at first. Concerns about odor. Possible noise violations from livestock. One even suggested my barn might be historically inappropriate for the area's visual cohesion. I laughed, poured myself a coffee, and ignored them. But Karen doesn't like being ignored. Soon, she was standing on my driveway in a tailored blouse and a clipboard, asking to inspect my property lines. I told her the only thing she'd be inspecting was the tread on her Prius tires on the way back out. Then came the demands. She wanted access to the eastern perimeter of my land, claimed HOA bylaws required night patrols for neighborhood safety, and she believed the boundary line between us was fluid. I handed her the laminated county map, dated and signed, showing the boundary exactly where my fence sat. She squinted at it like it was written in Klingon. "You know, Mr. Harper," she said, adjusting her glasses, "the HOA has certain expectations of surrounding properties." "I'm not a part of your HOA," I replied, "and this ain't surrounding property. This is mine." That's when her smile went brittle. Sometimes cooperation is better than confrontation. I said nothing. Bruno, standing about 20 feet behind me, snorted loud enough to make her jump. I couldn't have timed it better if I'd trained him. Later that week, I was talking with old Mr. Hayward, who's been living up the road since the 60s. He glanced over at Bruno and chuckled. "I remember when your granddad brought in his sire," he said. "That old bull, mean as a rattlesnake, but beautiful. Had a white blaze like a flame across his head. Folks came from 4 counties just to see him." I looked at Bruno, stomping the dirt, and felt a rare swell of pride. My farm might not be shiny, but it held history. And no HOA president with a superiority complex was going to rewrite it. Not on my watch. It was just after 2 in the morning when the motion sensors kicked on, lighting up the east pasture like a UFO landing strip. I had barely registered the alert on my tablet when the surveillance feed popped open and showed me what can only be described as the dumbest home invasion in rural history. There he was, a man in tactical cargo pants and a HOA-issued windbreaker, climbing over my 6-foot reinforced steel fence like he was storming Normandy. He dropped into the paddock, landing ankle-deep in mud, right into the heart of Bruno's territory. That man? He was not briefed. Bruno, for his part, did what any self-respecting descendant of livestock royalty would do when his kingdom was breached. He lifted his massive head from the hay pile, let out a sound like Satan gargling diesel fuel, and locked eyes with the intruder. The man froze. My camera caught the exact second his brain caught up with the rest of him and screamed, "Run!" I hit record. 30 seconds later, another figure appeared, this one climbing the fence with less grace and considerably more yelling. "Jim! Jim! Where are you?" came the shrill whisper. It was Karen. Of course it was Karen. She straddled the top rail like a panicked koala, teetering for a moment before gravity got its say, and dropped her straight into a fresh pile of what Bruno had left behind an hour ago. That thud? Oh, it was art. Bruno was now doing a slow, menacing circle, tail flicking, huffing steam in the crisp air. Jim tried to make a run for it, only for his foot to slip in the mud. Karen, trying to follow, screamed when Bruno lunged. Not to gore, no. Bruno, being theatrical, simply rushed within inches of her and kicked up a cloud of dirt and manure that coated her head to toe. A true rural baptism. By then, I'd made my way to the barn roof deck, coffee in one hand, megaphone in the other. I flipped on the loudspeakers, preloaded with a very convincing police scanner loop. All units, code 45 in progress. Trespass in livestock zone. Remain on site. They both froze like deer in headlights. Karen shrieked, slipping again. Jim darted for the fence, but Bruno, majestic and petty, rammed the feed trough just enough to send it skidding into Jim's legs. He tripped, yelped, and hung half over the fence, pants caught on a nail. His boxers were HOA branded. Karen started yelling something about a rescue operation. I responded via megaphone. Please stay in place. Livestock may become agitated by erratic movement. Karen then tried to use her tablet as a shield. Bruno, unimpressed, snorted and flicked his head, catching the tablet mid-air with one horn and sending it into the mud like a frisbee of doom. I was laughing so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Eventually, I opened the gate remotely, using the barn's control panel. Bruno, noble as ever, stood still while the invaders scrambled past him, slipping, shrieking, and covered in shame and cow feces. They didn't say a word as they limped out of the paddock, except Karen muttering something about filing a federal complaint. I took one last look at Bruno, who'd returned to his hay pile like nothing happened. He looked up, chewed thoughtfully, and let out a sound I swear translated to, "Peasants." I nodded. Damn right, Bruno. 3 days passed after the incident with Bruno, and things had gone eerily quiet. No more letters from the HOA. No midnight stakeouts. Not even a passive-aggressive email about unauthorized floodlighting. I knew better than to believe the silence meant surrender. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds in peace. It was just past 10:30 at night when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out the kitchen window and saw a silver Lexus parked right outside my gate. High beams off, engine still humming. Moments later, there was a knock on my front porch. 3 short taps, followed by an awkward pause, then 2 more. I opened the door, still wearing my flannel and thermal boots, and there she was. Karen Glass, dressed like she was attending an HOA gala rather than trespassing on my land at night. Cream-colored trench coat, perfectly curled hair, and a perfume cloud that didn't belong anywhere near livestock. "Tom," she said sweetly, clutching a folder to her chest like it held the Holy Grail, "may I come in for a moment? Just to talk, Privately. I stared at her for a second too long, then stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said, and you stay on the rug. She smiled, walked in with dainty steps, and looked around like she was mentally cataloging things to complain about. I'll get to the point, she began, sitting down uninvited at my kitchen table. What happened the other night? It was unfortunate. I had no idea Jim would react that way. And the bull, Bruno, is it? Well, I suppose animals can't be blamed for instinct? I crossed my arms. Let me be clear, she continued, voice syrupy. We don't want a war. The HOA is willing to overlook the misunderstanding and, let's say, move forward. Clean slate. She slid the folder across the table. Inside was a check, $25,000, made out to me. For your trouble, and of course, a mutual agreement to take down any posts, videos, or footage that might further embarrass certain parties. And perhaps moving Bruno to the rear paddock, less visible, less confrontational. I blinked at her, then at the check. Then I laughed, out loud. You think I'd sell my integrity and that bull for the price of a mid-range SUV? Her smile flickered. Tom, let's be reasonable. You're a practical man. Think of your family, your time. No, I said. I'm thinking of my grandfather, and Bruno's great-grandfather, and every man who worked this land before some self-righteous neighbor tried to erase their legacy. Karen's face hardened like a clay mask cracking in the sun. She stood abruptly, knocking the chair into the wall. I tried being civil, she hissed. Do you have any idea what's at stake for me? The HOA board, the community council. I've built this neighborhood into something pristine. Fake turf and bylaws don't make a community, I replied. You think this is over? She snapped, stepping toward me. You embarrassed me. Publicly. You made me look like a lunatic. You did that yourself. Her eyes narrowed to slits. You'll regret this, Harper. I'll make sure of it. And then she was gone, coat flaring, heels stabbing into the porch, slamming the door behind her so hard the window rattled. I stood still, watching her taillights disappear into the dark, and whispered to the room, Well, Bruno, I think the lady's gloves just came off. It was a little after 6 in the morning when I found the feed bucket half buried under the eastern fence, just inside Bruno's enclosure. It was oddly placed, too far from the normal trough, and not one I recognized. I bent down, gave it a cautious sniff, then frowned. The smell was wrong. Sweet, but bitter. Chemical. Bruno was standing several feet away, uncharacteristically still, eyeing the bucket like it had personally insulted his mother. Good boy. I scooped a bit into a Ziploc and called Doc Mulvaney, my longtime vet. By noon, he had it tested. Tom, he said quietly over the phone, there's pesticide residue in that mix. Heavy. Livestock-grade poison. One mouthful would have put that bull down in under 2 hours. I sat in silence, the phone hot against my ear. Bruno was alive. By dumb luck or sharp instinct, he hadn't touched the feed. But that wasn't just vandalism. That was a goddamn hit job. I filed a formal police report that afternoon. Trespassing, attempted destruction of property, malicious poisoning. I didn't have direct evidence, but I had enough suspicion to fill a barn. Karen's Lexus had been spotted idling down the road on security footage the night before, and there were tire tracks, matching hers, on the dirt shoulder near the fence line. But Karen didn't stop there. The next day, flyers began appearing on mailboxes up and down the street. Badly photoshopped images of Bruno, photoshopped with glowing red eyes, and phrases like livestock terror at large and dangerous animal, Cho demands removal. There was even a community survey attached with one checkbox, Should we demand relocation or legal euthanasia of the bull? Legal euthanasia. For Bruno, the heir of Bartholomew. My damn legacy. The signatures on the flyers? Anonymous? The printer used? HOA property. I knew because one of the HOA's own maintenance staff handed me one in secret, muttering, "I'm sorry, Mr. Harper. She made us do it." By midweek, I was getting anonymous calls, blocked numbers, voices disguised with fake accents. One woman called pretending to be from the Department of Agricultural Aesthetics, demanding to know if my livestock had visually disruptive patterns. Another guy just whispered, "Moo!" then hung up. Karen had clearly lost her grip on subtlety. Then came the observers. That Friday morning, 2 folding chairs popped up just outside my property, right beyond the fence line. A couple of HOA volunteers in polos and sunglasses sat with clipboards, watching the paddock like Bruno was plotting an escape. I walked out with coffee and asked, "You boys enjoying the show?" One of them stammered something about routine perimeter evaluation. I raised an eyebrow. That's odd, because unless you're evaluating the effects of petty psychosis, you're wasting daylight. That night, someone threw a rock through my kitchen window. Not a random one either. This one was painted with the HOA logo in red. I didn't call the sheriff. I invited him over personally. "Enough's enough, Tom," he said, examining the broken glass. "This ain't just nuisance anymore. This is criminal harassment." "I know," I said, watching Bruno through the cracked pane. He was calm again, chewing on hay like the world hadn't nearly tried to kill him. "But she hasn't crossed the line," I added. "Not legally. Not yet." The sheriff looked at me. "Then what'll you do?" I looked out at the pasture, at my legacy, at the stubborn, glorious beast who had survived both time and venom. "I'm going to draw the damn line for her. I'm not a man who cracks easily. I've shoveled through blizzards, pulled calves in thunderstorms, and once patched up a tractor engine in the middle of a wildfire evacuation. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the psychological siege of HOA warfare. Not like this. Every morning, I woke up expecting peace, and instead found something new stapled to a pole, duct-taped to my gate, or crumpled in my mailbox. They escalated fast. Karen had gone from flyers to formal community directives, with pseudo-legal language, complete with fake bylaws and digital signatures no real authority would ever recognize. Then came the final straw, a letter from the HOA Committee on Emergency Code Violations, declaring my fencing aggressively rural and psychologically obstructive to adjacent properties. That's a real quote. I laughed at first. Then I realized they'd sent it directly to the county office as well. But God works in ironic ways. And this time, He sent me a gift. It arrived on a USB stick tucked inside an anonymous envelope, left under my front doormat. No note, no name, just a flash drive with a single file. HOA_MEETING_AUDIO_3-22.mp3. I played it that night in the kitchen, lights low, nerves tight. It was a recording of Karen, no mistaking her voice, leading a closed-door HOA board meeting. She outlined plans to financially isolate the farmer, discussed strategies to provoke code violations, and even mentioned using external contractors to handle the bull situation. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something colder. Focus. I saved the file in 3 cloud backups, 1 offline hard drive, and emailed it to myself 6 different ways. Still, I knew I needed more. That's when Ricky, the HOA's part-time accountant and quiet young guy, who usually avoided eye contact, called me from a burner number. "Mr. Harper," he whispered, "I can't be part of this anymore. I have files, expense reports, GPS logs from patrols, altered maps. I can show you who signed what." We met behind the old grain elevator after dark. It felt dramatic, cloak and dagger, like we were smuggling state secrets. But the documents he gave me were more damning than anything I'd hoped for. Unauthorized withdrawals from HOA dues, proof of a tampered plat map, and a signed approval from Karen to use funds for neighborhood sanitation, code, apparently, for poisoning livestock. I stared at those papers under the dome light of my truck, the pages trembling in my hands. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. This was about fraud, power abuse, a little tyrant in a pantsuit trying to rewrite the rules of the land. And suddenly, I felt it, that quiet clarity. No more games, no more warnings. It was time. I spent the next 48 hours with my lawyer, scanning, compiling, preparing the legal cannon I was about to fire. We drafted the lawsuit, multiple counts, trespassing, fraud, attempted destruction of property, harassment, emotional damages, and yes, attempted animal cruelty. I didn't sleep much. On the third night, I wandered out to the barn, barefoot in the gravel, guided by instinct more than thought. Bruno was there, of course, awake, watching. His silhouette filled the space like a cathedral statue. I leaned on the rail and looked at him. "You know they came for you first," I murmured. "You're more than they can handle, Bruno. You always were." He stepped forward, massive and slow, and nudged my shoulder with his forehead. It wasn't a shove. It was something else. Like he knew. "I'm gonna burn them to the ground," I said quietly. Bruno let out a deep exhale. It rumbled like thunder rolling through an old canyon. The next morning, I walked into the sheriff's office and filed the lawsuit. 300 pages, multiple appendices, full exhibit list, sealed with copies of every fraudulent action Karen and her board had taken against me, and by extension, this land. I was no longer defending my property. I was taking the fight straight into their white-fenced courtrooms, and this time, I wasn't alone. They say courtrooms are built to be neutral, flat lights, pale walls, no color, no passion. But when I walked into that courthouse, boots polished, tie slightly crooked, the only thing neutral in that room was the carpet. Everything else? It buzzed with tension. My lawsuit had turned into a local spectacle. The gallery was packed, neighbors, reporters, even a couple of city council members, and sitting in the front row like a spider wrapped in silk was Karen Glass. She wore a charcoal pantsuit and a smile pulled so tight it looked like it had been stapled on. Her eyes, though, they were trembling. Maybe she'd figured it out, that I wasn't bluffing, that I had the proof, that she was about to be exposed, formally, publicly, and irrevocably. The judge entered, stern and slow, and the room fell silent. My lawyer stood beside me like a stone pillar. I could feel Bruno's presence like a ghost hovering behind me. Every time I looked down at the folder marked Exhibit C, Livestock Incident Footage, I thought of his broad shoulders, the way he stood firm when they came for him. We opened strong. First came the recordings, Karen's own voice directing the poisoning scheme in veiled corporate euphemisms. Then the expense reports, dozens of line items marked security consultation or community aesthetics used to pay for fake patrols and surveillance. We had the altered maps, the forged bylaws, even Ricky on the stand, trembling but resolute, as he testified that Karen ordered documents to be falsified for jurisdictional purposes. Karen sat through most of it, with her jaw clenched so tight it looked wired shut. She didn't say a word, until the judge asked her counsel if she wished to make a statement. She stood and cracked. "I did what I had to do," she blurted, voice slicing through the silence. "That animal was a menace. That man was deliberately provoking us, humiliating us." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Us, Ms. Glass? The HOA," she spat. "I built that neighborhood. I maintained order. I kept it clean. I made it desirable." "By faking documents?" I asked, before my lawyer could nudge me quiet. She wheeled toward me. "You and that animal made me a joke. You made me crawl through mud and shite in front of everyone." "You did that to yourself?" I said calmly. "You think you're some folk hero now? With your bull and your fences? You're just a stubborn farmer too proud to change." I could have said a dozen things, but I just looked at her and quietly replied, "And you're a liar too proud to admit you lost." That was it. Her lawyer buried his face in his hands. The judge called a recess. 30 minutes later, we were back. Verdict time. It came down like a thunderclap. Having reviewed the evidence presented by both parties and considering the extent of misconduct, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Mr. Thomas Harper Karen didn't even blink. She was frozen. The court awards Mr. Harper compensatory damages in the amount of $960,000 and issues an injunction against all current and former officers of the Deer Hollow HOA from initiating contact or approaching the Harper property within 300 yards. Gasps in the gallery. A few quiet claps. The judge raised a hand. Further, given the gravity of Ms. Glass's actions, including document tampering, attempted destruction of property, and criminal harassment, the court recommends immediate transfer for criminal prosecution. Karen finally spoke, but it wasn't words, just a dry, choked sound that cracked as she sat down, hard, like her body finally caught up with her conscience. The HOA board members were each assigned community service and restitution orders. 2 were hit with accessory charges for fraud. Ricky was cleared entirely. My lawyer shook my hand so hard I thought my elbow might come off. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters asked questions. One of them yelled, "Mr. Harper, any comment?" I paused at the top of the steps and smiled just enough to be dangerous. "Justice smells like manure today," I said, "and I like that smell just fine." I got in my truck, drove back to the farm, pulled into the barn, and walked straight to Bruno's pen. He was lying in the hay, chewing slow, eyes half-lidded. I climbed over the gate, sat beside him, and leaned back against his massive shoulder. We didn't say anything. Didn't need to. We'd won. It's been 4 months since the trial ended, and things have changed around here. The kind of change that's both subtle and seismic. My fences are still the same. The barn still creaks in the wind, and Bruno still snorts at squirrels like they owe him money. But the air feels different. Lighter. Quieter. As if the land itself knows it was defended. The first thing I did after receiving that compensation check, well, after paying off the lawyer and replacing every window Karen's goons had cracked, was order a sign. Not a standard "no trespassing" slab of aluminum. Number Y went big. 10 feet wide, hand-carved oak, sealed with resin and bolted into 2 railroad ties I dragged in with my old Massey Ferguson. It reads, "Private property. Do not approach. Bull unchained. Owner 2." And below it, in brass letters, "We don't do HOA here." People drive out just to take pictures of it now. I've seen teenagers do TikToks in front of it. One local brewery asked to use the phrase on a beer label. I gave them permission on one condition. The label had to feature Bruno's face. He's famous now, of course. After the courtroom footage went viral, A local documentary team interviewed me for a short series called Land and Legacy. Bruno got a full 10-minute segment, slow-motion footage of him chasing HOA officers through the mud, cut to a Wagner score. The internet lost its collective mind. Somebody even made a plush version of him. I've got 3 in the house, one for each kid and one for me, obviously. Tour groups started calling next. School buses, retirees, even a group of agricultural historians from Nebraska. I had to build a small parking area just off the main road. Nothing big, just some gravel and a wooden kiosk, where people can read about the farm's history. Bruno has his own plaque, listing his bloodline all the way back to Bartholomew. Turns out, Old Man Hayward had a photo of the original bull from 1954, standing proud with my grandfather. We framed it and put it up inside the barn. Not everyone comes for history, though. Some just want to see the bull that broke an HOA. Bruno doesn't mind the attention. He struts a little now, I swear. Knows he's a local legend. Kids draw him in school. One little girl gave me a crayon picture of him wearing a superhero cape. I put it on the fridge next to my property deeds. As for Karen, she's not on social media anymore. I heard she's serving time at a minimum security facility upstate, teaching conflict resolution classes, of all things. Irony walks in boots sometimes. The HOA dissolved entirely. The subdivision's under new management now, some young couple with a background in environmental planning and none of Karen's God complex. We shook hands at a town hall meeting. They brought a bottle of wine as a peace offering. I gave them a jar of my wife's jalapeno jelly and said, "Just don't try to regulate my compost pile, and we'll get along just fine." And me? I'm still farming, still up before dawn, still patching fences and checking troughs and muttering at Bruno when he knocks over another gate just for fun. But now, when I walk the perimeter, there's a different weight to my boots. The weight of knowing I didn't back down. That when push came to shove, when someone tried to bulldoze over decades of sweat and soil, I stood up. And I won. The other day, as the sun dropped behind the ridge, I sat with Bruno at the edge of the pasture, the air golden and still. "Guess we showed him, huh, big guy?" I said. He didn't answer. Just kept chewing, then let out a long, satisfied grunt that echoed through the hills like a stamp of approval. And in that moment, I realized, some victories don't need fireworks or speeches. Sometimes they come in the form of a sign, a sunset, and a bull who refused to budge.